and good evening, and welcome back to another match review brought to you by Argyle Life and the Green and White podcast. This one is the debut of Miron Muslic in the home park dugout as Oxford United with a team to come to town, and Argyle finally found a way eventually in the second half to get a second half equaliser against Gary Rowett's Yellows to keep us 3 unbeaten in the league and 4 unbeaten in all competitions. As always, this is an interactive show. We welcome your thoughts, comments, questions, and just general chit chat in the comment section, really. We know you like to have a good debate with one another in the YouTube comment section, so do get involved. Tonight, we will be bringing you everything, really, a full match run through from yesterday's games, talking points on the performance. We'll then be discussing in depth, now that it's confirmed, the official departure of Neil Dewsnip. We will also be touching on the January transfer window. Has it perhaps plateaued somewhat after 2 early signings? And then we will just about squeeze in a preview of the visit of Queen's Park Rangers on Saturday lunchtime. As you can see, I have a motley crew joining me this evening. Graham to my left as you're looking at it, Adam bottom right, and Sam has the unenviable position of being below me. Adam has missed the memo of the black attire this evening, but we will forgive him of that. And let's get straight into it, Sam, because there is plenty to discuss once again. So why don't you start us off with Argyle 1, Oxford 1?
Yeah, so we went into the game very full of excitement. I think we last spoke to you, didn't we, the Sunday after the Brentford game, and the mood was very good. And Argyle on Monday morning put out that fantastically rousing clip of Miron Muslic, which I think is how you pronounce it, Joe. You maybe doubt myself with your pronunciation, but they put out that fantastic clip of Miron talking to the team. Incredibly great speaker, very inspiring words from him. I saw that Argyle tweets, so I know as a regular in our comment section, described it as a Churchillian speech, and I don't disagree with that. And then the players came out and put in a performance like they'd just been listening to Keir Starmer rather than Churchill. It was a very flat performance, good speech. So I don't know quite what happened between the speech and the game, because the performance certainly didn't match the speech, I'm afraid to say. The feel-good mood going into it. We started quite brightly. First 5-10 minutes. Puac put in a lovely cross, which Rami El-Haj forced a great save out of Cumming, who sadly didn't feel like gifting us a goal like he did the last time he played us for MK, when he just let one in through his arms. Wasn't so generous today. He fantastic save in that one. And then obviously it fell to Barley, who couldn't quite get it in from an angle. I think we were the better team than Oxford for much of the first half, but the game was played at a very slow, very pedestrian pace. Like the weird atmosphere all around, same as the Bristol City game was. The crowd was a bit flat, and I wonder if we kind of got fatigue really of having these big build-ups and this, siege mentality, get behind the team. I wonder if we've just got a bit fed up of it after having it when Schumacher left, and having it again when Foster left, and then when Rooney arrived, and then when Rooney left. I wonder if it's getting a bit like Groundhog Day now, where it's just one big event after the other, and we're just all a bit fatigued with it, because it was a really quiet crowd, I have to say. Oxford have never been the loudest set of fans in the world, but I felt they outsung us last night, if truth be told. But we were edging the game just slightly until Victor Paulsen, who did such a good job of looking like a decent centre-half for 135 minutes of football, then decides to go off and do a complete kamikaze run, massively overcommitting, way out of position. It falls to Will Vaulks, who, it's a good strike, don't get me wrong, but it's right in the middle of the goal. I think Grimshaw could do a bit better. Joe and Graham are both shaking their head for the audio listeners, but Adam's nodding his head, so I think he agrees with me. It's don't get me wrong, it's a good strike, but it's very central.
Sam, name me a keeper in the Championship who would have stopped that.
I think Connor Hazard for one, but
it's gone like an Exocet missile. It's flown into the roof of the net.
I think if he parries it back out, fair enough. I'm not expecting him to hold on to it. I'm not expecting him to get it round for a corner. I think he can parry it back out. Anyway, moving on from that. We went behind, and I think that did dent our confidence. The second half, we came out, I think, much worse after a decent-ish first half, not great. Second half, Oxford were better at the start of the half, and it was only really a matter of time. We were thinking before maybe they doubled their lead, but almost against the run of play. Again, another lovely cross from Pooh. Actually, he did put in a lot of overhit ones last night, certainly from corners, but he put in 2 absolute pearls as well, both for Rami, one of which Rami forced a good save out of Cummings, and the second of which he scored. Kind of makes it all the more crazy that when Whittaker and Sissoko were both out injured, Rooney was just refusing to play this guy because he's a good player. I didn't quite maybe appreciate how good he was. I think I made the mistake of actually thinking Rooney's judgment must be based on something which it wasn't really, because I kind of thought, well, if he's not playing, there must be something wrong with him. But actually, no, it was something wrong with Rooney for not playing him. So yeah, we equalised. We then had what I would probably say was our best spell of the game for about 10 to 15 minutes after our equalising goal. It kind of looked like we were just going to put them on the ropes a bit. Randall was it certainly in that phase of the game fantastic. I do have a little point to make later, Joe, about the discourse surrounding Randall. So if you can remind me of that later, that would be great. But I think that phase of the game, we were really good. And then it just ebbed back in Oxford's favour. They forced a decent save out of Grimshaw. I think we then went to 4 at the back in a very late subs, by the way. Maybe that's just with Miron Muslic not quite knowing the squad yet, maybe giving the players that are out there as much time. He didn't really know perhaps the full skill set, which, that's no fault on him. He's only had 1 session on the grass with them, so I don't really blame him for that. I don't blame him at all for that, in fact. But they were late subs, and I got to say, the player I think we were absolutely crying out for, which I've not really seen anyone talk about, given how good he's been in the last 2 games, is Sorinola. I think Mumba didn't have a bad game, but he had times where he just got a bit pinned on the touchline, couldn't really break past the player, and just had to come inside because there was no other option. So I don't think Mumba was as useful. Whereas with Sorinola, what he's really offered at Brentford, at Stoke, at home to Bristol City, is that real width, that fantastic width that he offers. And is he the most technically gifted player in the world? No, he's not. And I've said that many times on this show. But he offers width, he offers athleticism, getting up and down the line, and he's an incredibly hard worker. And I think if we'd have had him on, which I was crying out for, we could have had width on both sides. Rather than reality, we only had width on one side, and it made us a bit one-dimensional. We were pushed in the middle a bit too much, and Gary Rowett set out to frustrate us. The other name I'm seeing in the comments coming on with Bundu, and I think that's a fair comment. I think Baidu's clearly not a centre forward, not in the way that we were playing him anyway. I'm not, obviously not writing him off. He's only been in the country a few days, but I don't think he's a centre forward. I'll tell you that right now. I think he's more of an attacking midfielder. So yeah, I think Bundu coming on earlier for Baidu would have been a good pick. I think Sorinola coming on would have been a good pick. So I was a little bit frustrated by the subs. But I think when we eventually did make a change, we went 4 at the back. And I think that 4 at the back was perhaps with the intention of just going to win the game. But actually, in reality, it just opened us up a bit too much. And Oxford then had a very good chance to win the game. Grimshaw goes for a cross, punches it out. Unfortunately, it just falls right to their guy. And it's, mid-long range shot when the second Grimshaw save was really excellent. I'll give him that, as much as I'm blaming him a bit for the first. The second save was excellent. I think that's very much one that perhaps not many other keepers would have saved, because whilst I don't, I think there are some areas where Grimshaw struggles. Where he is good at is those reflex saves in the air. So I'll give him credit for that. But yeah, overall, a lackluster performance, in my opinion. Couple of spells where we looked quite good, but as I say, it was we heard Winston Churchill, but perhaps for them it was more like Keir Starmer or Ian Duncan Smith from the way they played. It was not a performance that stirred many people in the ground.
Graham, I'll come to you shortly. I just want to go to Adam very quickly. Adam, when the team sheet was announced, there was one glaring, I don't want to say issue with it, but there was one glaring omission, and that was that of Connor Hazard off the back of back-to-back clean sheets, including the most recent one at one of the most potent home attacks in the Premier League. that always then left a doubt in your head. Was there anything else you were surprised at with the team list, the team shape, any of the? I mean, we'll come on to the substitutions or lack of them later on, but just from a starting point, what did you think of the team selected?
I'm a little bit surprised. Some obviously enforced with Grimshaw coming in for Hazard. The other, I mean, I was surprised to see Victor Paulson still playing in centre back despite his very good performance up in Brentford, and I don't necessarily think it was the wrong decision. I think the goal is
I think
unfortunate.
Such was injured as well, Adam, because Such wasn't on the bench, so I think Such was probably injured also.
I think even so, even if he was
injured,
then you know, I still don't not the decision, because ultimately, aside from the goal, Victor Paulson's had, generally speaking, a good game. It's very easy to say, you know, when you're a defender and you've and you've conceded. I mean that's the only blot on your copy book. Of course it is, but generally speaking, he did a lot very well, and certainly his best performance at home park, I think, will go that far. So, I mean, enforced, surprised, I don't know. I mean, the substitutions come on to with the goalkeeper situation. I will be diplomatic and say that Grimshaw evened himself out. I think we'll go with that, because I am much closer to Sam in my view, that as much as it's a well-struck shot, it's well struck in the middle of the goal, not in the corner of the goal, and a quick. If there was some anticipation, perhaps I think Grimshaw would at the very least have got closer to it. Would Michael Cooper have saved it? Yeah, I think so. Would James Trafford have saved it? Yeah. Would Ainsley Pears have saved it? Yeah, I think he would. So, you know, there's stuff to work on there, but at the end, with those couple of saves, admittedly one was an instant from his own punch away, but he's still got to make that save, and I think the last two that he makes there just about keep him in positive credit. So we'll see how that goes around next time out. I don't know if you want to touch on it now, or whether this is a question you've got lined up, Joe, but ultimately it was more of a surprise as to how or what didn't come off the bench than what was ultimately in the starting lineup. So
we'll come on to substitutions in a bit, because I think there's quite a lot of discourse going around, wasn't there, about the substitutions. So we'll save that up for a little while. Graham, I'll come to you, because I think me and you are probably, without the support of those in the comments, I think we appear to be in a minority of two about this first goal. I think Dan Grimshaw might have broken a hand and he tried to stop it personally, but on the first goal in particular, because we'd seen actually up to that point this high line, this aggressive press of Miron's trying to play in their half. I mean, there was one point in the first half, I think it was on about 30 minutes, we actually only had one player in our own half, and they were in possession at the time. We kind of reverted back to type a little bit when it came round to that first goal, though, didn't we? Because we'd noticeably dropped 3 or 4 yards deeper as a starting position. And the question I have for you, because I can't seem to answer it, is whilst we all want to dig out Victor Paulson for chasing thin air, in terms of the ball, where was Pleggy in all of that? It looked like he was in their half.
It wasn't a good goal to concede, and certainly Paulson was out of position, Pleggy was out of position, but nobody's actually said about the 3 defenders that were in front of Vaux when he took the shot. And if you look, Brendan Galloway turned his back on it, whereas Brentford, how many players were diving in, jumping in and blocking? And that didn't happen hardly at all last night, and I don't know why. But certainly, I would have thought Galloway could have made a better effort at stopping the attempt. It's only when you see the goal from behind, which you can on Argyle TV, do you see not only the pace of it, but the sudden rise in elevation, because it went level and then suddenly shot up. It's such a pure strike that it was virtually past Grimshaw before he even stuck his hand out. So some keepers might have saved it, but we've got to give credit to Vaux, who I thought him and Brannigan ran the midfield and was principally the reason why we only got a draw, because Adam and Darko certainly couldn't compete at the same level as those two. And not much credit's given to Oxford, but don't forget, I think they're the second in the form table behind Burnley. And just as a reminder, QPR, I think, 6th. So we've got 3 home games against 3 of the top 6 in form. So that's something to bear in mind when we're looking for results. And we're a bit sort of condescending about Oxford, thinking, well, we should be beating them. But to be fair to Gary Rowett, he set them up. And the reason why we were less effective second half is he basically closed all the gaps. And that's why we couldn't play forward. First half, first 20 minutes, I thought the front 3 were really, really good at pressing. Al-Hajj and Whittaker particularly were pressing high and hard, and Randall and JB were following. There's a bit, the defence I don't think pushed up as much, and then suddenly the defence pushed up. I don't know if you noticed at times, we had 3 back and they had 4 up. And I was just worried, high line, no pace in the defence really, that we were going to get exposed, but it didn't actually happen. But one of the stats that I thought was most interesting was the number of touches in the game each team had. We had 709, Oxford had 507. We had 9 touches in the box. That's less than 1%, or just over 1% of all our touches in the game were in the box. And I think that tells you the story a little bit of our season. We do not get up and play in the opposition half or penalty area enough. And I know Oxford had many more touches in the box, largely because of the number of throws they had into the box. But it's just an example of we're not playing as he will want us to play, and it's going to take some time for us to adapt to be doing so. And the second half, when we were passing it around back to me to use stuff, it's because there was no runners, there was no space. They shut it all down, and welcome to Championship football is all I would say. And it's going to take some real hard work at Harper's Park to get us playing in the way that he wants. But more importantly, I think we're going to have to recruit in the next couple of weeks or so to make a difference, because that team playing that way cannot fulfill the brief that he wants. I'm absolutely certain of that. And it's not to be critical of them. It's just the reality of the Championship is really hard. You've got to really be on it every game. You can't afford an off day. And by God, when we've had off days, we've been hammered. But thankfully, those days seem to have gone. But we've got to up our game, and we've got to work hard, and it's going to take time. But we've got 20 games. It's still possible. We're only effectively 4 points adrift with a goal difference. Win 2 and the other teams draw 2 or lose 1 and draw 1. We're in the mix again. So it can change really, really quickly.
You know, I think your point there about not having runners in behind and things, tin hat on, people still want to get rid of Ryan Hardy. That's his game, getting in behind, running off the shoulder. But that's a debate for when Ryan Hardy's back fit.
Yeah. And I just wanted to mention, and I haven't mentioned him, Puhach. That is an international player. That's what he is. I thought he was superb. Obviously, Psycho replica is an obvious point, but yes, I think he overhit a couple of corners, but the two of the 3 crosses he put in were magnificent. Goal scoring opportunities. Al-Hajj was a bit unlucky. I think he didn't quite connect where the keeper saved it, but the header was perfect. And there's no way that he's going to get dislodged out of the left wing back position. The only worry is with Such out, I think he might end up, and Brendan Galloway hobbling at the end, he might end up playing as the left side of the back 3. But I thought it was a fantastic full debut, and I think he's a cult hero in the making.
I'm not sure if he is to play in that left-sided centre half. I'm not sure as an attacker I'd want to go up for a header with him personally. But there was one tackle in particular yesterday, a 50-50 that he was running onto, and I actually saw the attacker just pull his leg away from it a little bit. I think he put the fear of God into him. One other point to make because Graham's now touched on Puhach, so I'll come to Adam and Sam for their players.
Puhach,
sorry. Pronunciations is not my forte tonight.
No, we know that, Joe.
Was that in January and in the summer, the Plymouth Argyle fan base were quite negative towards Gary Rowett, saying that he's not good enough for our club and he's not the right man for us. Well, I'm sorry, he's turning Oxford into quite the solid outfit at the moment. And, you know, you should never, ever write somebody off without seeing their team play at home.
To be fair, Jerry, he's made them that solid outfit with the right players to make a solid outfit. They're very physical. They got high energy. They got 2 really good midfield players. They are the physical version of what we need to be, and we're a long way from it.
Yeah.
It says a
Adam,
lot
did
that
you want
this
to jump
is.
in quickly?
Yeah, just on the back of that, it's the second season in a row where Gary Rowett team has come to Home Park and more or less done a job on us. Okay, we ended up getting a result yesterday. We certainly didn't last season under I can't remember who was manager that. Oh yes, I can. It was Stephen Schumacher. Just in case that was yeah. I'll stop trying to bait Sam.
Are you hearing this, Sam?
But yeah, sorry, he's keeping his composure far more than I'd hoped. But yeah, it's that's the sort of thing a Gary Rowett team can do, and it's the context of this result isn't necessarily going to be decided immediately. It's going to be decided in the coming weeks if it's something to build on. But right now, as much as the situation is pretty bleak, pretty dire, getting a draw at home to the Oxford side is possibly not as bad a result as it would initially seem on reflection, or particularly at the start of the season when you're looking at that as kind of the must-win game. Context is everything, obviously, and I'm not going to pretend that I don't think we're going to go down simply because of where the table lies. But this has got to start somewhere, and why can't it start with a gritty 1-1 draw at home before we go on to bigger and better things?
This was the point I tried to make on X last night after muting all of our group chats, was that everybody just needed to take a breath last night, because in the grand scheme of things, yes, a point against a relegation rival is not a great result at home. You've got to be winning those games. Come May, that could prove to be worth double that point. It could even be worth 3 times as much. So let's just wait. And Sam, I know you want to jump in, but I want to come to Adam very quickly. Let's just wait until the end of the season, then we'll assess whether that was a good point or not. Adam, I'll come to you, then I'll go back to Sam. Graham's mentioned Timo. That's what we're going to go with. He's mentioned Timo as his player that he wants to pick out, as have 242 of the 302 posters on Passotti so far in their man of the match poll. So you've got a bit less fish to pick from in the pond, but who do you want to single out, positively or negatively? It's over to you.
We do, and just to be clear, given free reign, I'd have done exactly the same. I thought is our best player by a very, very long way. I'm gonna do a bit of both, positive and negative, and touch again and give a bit more on this Victor Palsson central centre back discussion, dilemma, whatever you want to call it. Watching the goal back, I think we would all agree that he does not do well for it. But I think Graham's made a very good point that there's actually quite a few players there who don't do very well for the goal. And there's a few that could perhaps, Galloway could have got himself in the way, Pleggy could have been better positioned. Palsson stands out because he charged in like a bull in the china shop and ended up getting nowhere near the ball. But it wasn't just him that was the reason we conceded. There was a fair few. I'd argue also the goalkeeper, but I know it's debatable. Regardless, it's a very, very good strike, and I don't think any of us would take it away from that. That being said, if you're going to play Victor Palsson, I'm going to sound like a broken record time and time again, but if you're going to play Victor Palsson, you play him at central centre back in a back three. And I think the last 2 games have demonstrated that to absolute perfection. I don't want to see him squaring up to the likes of Gassama or Anis Mehmeti or Borja Sainz at a right-back position, because he's going to get completely overrun. He's not that sort of player. He may have been 5 years ago. He's not that sort of player anymore. But in terms of doing the basics, doing the stuff in the centre, that standard defending of heading the ball away, of getting himself on a fair few of those long Oxford throws that could have caused us all sorts of trouble, he was absolutely fine. He also... now he's made 15 clearances in that game, which I am almost certain is more than any Argyle player has made in a single football match this season. Now, that obviously needs to be contextualized in its own right. Yes, you'd expect him to be clearing it more because he's in the middle. Yes, if we're under pressure, you expect more clearances to happen. Okay, a few of his clearances just went completely out of play. But he made them. That's what he's there to do, and he did it. His basic defending for 90% of that game was absolutely fine. That doesn't mean I don't think we can upgrade on him still. You know, I'm still not the ultimate cheerleader of the Victor Palsson fan club that I was, say, 5-6 months ago before the horror and reality started to come to me. But I think he did most of his job very well. And I will just make a mention as well for the leadership aspect as well. I think having someone there who's clearly loud, like a burly Nordic bloke in the middle of your defence, is a nice thing to have for inspiring confidence in a lot of the side. I think he was first on a couple of occasions to just high five some of his teammates when they dealt with something. He was there making sure everybody was pushing out. I've been waiting many months to have the opportunity to have time on this podcast to praise Victor Palsson, and it's never really come to me until now. So I am going to milk it for all it's worth. But I think if judging him just on that one incident yesterday, I think would be unfair because he's made so many clearances. He's won many of his aerial duels, and do you know what? I don't think his playing out from the back was too bad either. So I'd like to think he's someone we'll upgrade on. We'll come on to the transfer window a little bit later on, but yesterday and Saturday, Victor, top job.
Yeah, I don't think many people would disagree with that. Incidentally, of that poll on Passotti, Palsson did come in with 10 votes. Interestingly, Dan Grimshaw came in with 10 votes, but I suspect when I come to you now, he's probably not the player you're going to pick out. Who do you want to single out before I come to you with the first viewer question of the night?
What gave you that impression, Joe? No, I see Adam's point on Palsson. I still feel that he was a bit too slow when he had the ball at his feet, and he invited the press a bit too much, which limited their options. But I can see some of Adam's points. So positive, I'm gonna go for Adam Randall. I'm seeing a lot of narrative developing around Randall lately, and this isn't just a positive on his performance in the game yesterday. It's about him over the season, because I do think, yes, over the run of Rooney's final games and the start of Mansfield's caretaker spell, he had a rough few games, but I think he was absolutely exceptional at Brentford. And I think last night he had what I would genuinely call a mixed game. I don't think he was poor. I think certainly in the spells in which we were good, he was good. And I think he made the team tick around him in that sense. I know that Graham mentioned that Brannigan had the better in midfield, and I agree, but I think Brannigan was more on JB. Randall was more on Volks' side, and obviously it's quite fluid. But I think whilst JB had an absolutely terrible game, I agree with that fully. I don't think Randall did. And I think there's been a bit of a false narrative develop around Randall this season, which has kind of understandably arisen in a result of a few bad games, which is that, he's just in the team because he's one of our own. He's a negative passer. All he does is pass it sideways and backwards. We've heard that Chestnut about sideways and backwards about so many players, and all of them have gone on to have better careers outside of Argyle. The job of a number 6, which is what he's been most of the season, is to sit deep and recycle the ball, and actually does very well. I should add, for someone who is relatively short and not exactly bulky, he wins an awful lot in the air for someone who was not the biggest. How many times last night when he was up against Volks or even against Brannigan once or twice did he put in a real good contest in the air? Probably better than he had any right to, given his size disadvantage. But quite aside from that, let's look at his stats over the season. I saw a fantastic tweet from Owen, OLPAFC, who I know is sometimes a watcher of the pod, earlier on, and I'm going to credit him for it, because over the season, Randall has the highest expected assists of the whole team. He has the most big chances created of the whole team. He has the most average key passes per game. He has the most accurate long balls per game. And he has the third highest pass percentage completion. So despite the fact he's trying riskier passes and he's creating big chances, he's still broadly accurate. Yes, there will be some where he recycles the ball and just switches the play. That's what the role of a deep line midfielder is to do. Have you ever seen, for example, Busquets for Barcelona in their heyday? Obviously not that he's that good, but in terms of the role within the team, that's what he plays. And even despite that, he's still very good off the ball. He's still very good at pressing. And he still has that, defense splitting pass in him from time to time. And it just baffles me that I'm seeing people thinking, he gets away with it. We need to start having a conversation about Randall. Well, You can have a conversation about him if you want, but that's my response. My response is statistically, he's been absolutely fantastic player. I think probably Gibson was on track for player of the season, but he's now swanned off to Preston. So of the players that are left, I honestly think Randall's on track for player of the season for me. And I think that there's a lot of narrative that he's a negative player and that he's, free riding in the team because he's a local boy. I couldn't disagree more. And I think the stats show that he's a good player. And I think that he put in a broadly pretty decent game last night.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fairly passionate defence of our current captain, and I can't disagree with everything you say. He does frustrate me at times when he often finds himself turning into trouble rather than turning out of it. And some of those passes he does give away really do frustrate me at times, because you just think, just pick the simple pass. But he knows if he picks a simple pass, he's going to have 15,000 people moan at him that he's gone backwards. So I do kind of get that it's a little bit complex.
I'm not saying he's perfect, Joe, and I agree. He did have that last 10 minutes. He was rubbish. I agree. I probably was about on track to give him man of the match on the 80th minute mark, but then he dropped off a cliff. So I sort of deducted man of the match away from him. But he isn't perfect. But when he's good, he can be really good.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think it's a point we made just before Christmas that seemingly when we were good under Rooney, Randall was running the show essentially, and I think there was one game in particular. I think it was Middlesbrough. Just didn't allow Randall to play for the first 20 minutes. They doubled up on him, and the one time he got free, we went and scored. So, it's clear that teams know how influential he is. Just dipping back to the Passotti man of the match poll, there were also votes for Pleguezuelo, Galloway, Mumba. Randall attracted 13, but I'm going to go with, I'll just give a little mention to Rami El Hadj in a little bit of detail. 16 votes. He was the second best, which is something, with the second highest voted person only gets 16 votes in a poll. But I thought Rami El Hadj yesterday, first half, was exactly the sort of player we've been waiting to see from him. Anything that was good in an attacking sense came from him. And look, I've got to attribute the same thing to Rami as I do to Randall, is that some of the passes he gives away are just really sloppy. He's almost trying too hard with a little fancy flicks and turns and rolls of players. But he drew a brilliant save out of Oxford keeper, didn't he, first half? And he had a couple of relatively comfortable long range efforts saved by the keeper as well. So if we can keep Rami Al Hadj purring, and he looks like the sort of player that's going to work hard in Miron's system, then hopefully we'll see the best of him as he gets more used to English football second half of the year, because we do have to remember how difficult it is for these players coming into the Championship. It is one of the hardest leagues, not just in Europe but also in the world, certainly for physicality. And when you're coming up against teams that are managed by people like Gary Rowett and things week in, week out, it's going to be difficult no matter how gifted you are as a player. Moving it on then, we've got well over 1,300 people watching us already. Of course, you're very welcome to join us. Do keep getting the comments and questions in. We will get round to showing as many of them and asking as many of them towards the back end of the show. We still do have a preview of QPR to come up, as well as transfer talk and Neil Dewsnip, a word on him to come as well. But let's touch on the final point on last night, and it's just a general one really. I don't know which one of you wants to take it. It doesn't have to go into too much depth if you don't want to. I'm going to avoid going into a rant about Sam Allison tonight, because I gave myself enough embolisms last night moaning to people around me about the refereeing standards. So we'll forget that tonight. But just the point on the substitutes then, because it took us an age to go to the bench last night, and the obvious thing for me is that perhaps Sissoko is not as fit as we want him to be. Obviously, Sorinola and Bundu clearly weren't fit enough to take any part in yesterday's game, because surely they would have been on the pitch. What do we make of the substitutions? Was that just that maybe Miron thought there was nothing wrong, so why try and overcomplicate it and change it? Or is there, is this something we're going to have to watch moving forward?
Well, I hope you didn't think that, because it was quite a bit wrong. But certainly, JB. Sorry, Graham, go on.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think a lot of focus is on Miron as head coach, but I sit opposite the dugout, so I see all the activity. And to me, and somebody who was sat on the lower Mayflower said that Nance was the one who was really shouting, running the show. And I do wonder how much he relied on Nance and Joe for that game on their thoughts as to the substitutions, because clearly they would know the players to put on and change the game if possible. It's impossible for him to have known. Having said that, they were late in the day, and I mean, and you mentioned Bassotti, and I might get another brown envelope from Ian Newell for mentioning it again, but I pointed out that Schumacher, his finest was what I call the 60-30 approach, where 60 minutes players went flat out, and then we had 30 minutes of people coming on going flat out, and that kept the pace of the game fairly even over the 90 plus minutes. And I wondered, if we're going to play this high press system, high energy and all the rest of it, we're going to have to revert to something like that. And we simply didn't. I was expecting subs to come on pretty close to the 70th minute at least. And I think the earliest was 75, I think it was. Sissoko clearly was too late, and he did a shape change with going for at the back. But I mean, I think he only touched it once, didn't he? When he came on, he got
twice, I think it was in the end.
He did one nutmeg and then ran into trouble. So, it wasn't enough to change the game or make any impact. And I think people will question it, but I would say maybe it's a one-off because he relied on Nance and Joe to guide him on that. And I mean, the other point with him, I don't know if you noticed, but he came out second half way ahead of the players. He was in the dugout a long time before. So you sort of wonder, I don't know how the dynamic works, how much he left to Nance and Joe to shake things up at half time. So, I mean, that's to see how it develops. But yeah, there's no question, because we didn't get the result, the subs were late, didn't have any impact. But to be fair, our bench is not strong. We've got game changers, but they got to be given a bit more time. Suzuki's a game changer, Bundu possibly, but we don't know their fitness levels. I mean, just looking at the players at the end of the game, they virtually expired. I mean, Galloway, if we hadn't made 3 subs, he wouldn't have stayed on. And I think every player was right at their limits. And we don't know how many injuries they're carrying. Sorinola famously struggles towards the end of games, and he really was exerted to the full at Brentford. So, yeah, they monitor these things. They do all the testing, so they've got the analysis. We've got three home games in 8 days, so he's got to even the workload out, perhaps. But they're only possible explanations. But like everyone else, the subs seemed late and they made no impact.
Yeah, go on, Adam.
I just say I think Graham's made a key point there about the strength of the bench as well. I personally would have liked to have seen subs made on the hour mark. I think a lot of us would have done, particularly with the players you've got on the bench, notwithstanding, of course, the fitness levels on there. But when you come out of those players that I want to see come on and make an impact, i.e. Ibrahim Sissoko, the actual depth there starts to make you question. I mean, with Such out, it's not as if you could quickly and easily stop a centre back. Your midfield option is generally Jordan Houghton, particularly with Forshaw now gone. And Houghton's not a bad player by any stretch, but I'm not sure he's the sort of player you want to bring on to change a game at championship level. So it all links back, I think, to what is going to happen in the next fortnight, and something we're going to discuss very shortly about the transfer window. Because this, in short, it cannot be this squad ending the transfer window. The number of days, I know it's something we'll discuss on rumours that may have gone slightly quiet, but there's got to be movement. I'd love to see movement, to be honest, before the QPR game. But of course, with every minute that goes by, it looks less and less likely. But it's got to happen soon. And if it does happen soon, we'll then have more options, say on the hour mark, to say, okay, well, let's get either someone we've rested on or somebody new to make an impact, and could have more joy from the bench. I don't think it was used well yesterday, but I don't think that's necessarily entirely the fault of Muslic or his team.
we'll bookmark the transfer talk because we are one question and a couple of minutes away from that. Sam, I want to come to you on this. The club confirmed during Miron Muslic's press conference on Monday that Neil Dewsnip had departed the football club after what sounded like the first part of a footballing structure review that is taking place. It sounds like there may be more in-depth looks at the footballing structure going to take place over the next couple of months and maybe into the summer. Neil Dewsnip departs the club after, 5 and a bit years of service. He came in just shortly after Ryan Lowe came into the football club, didn't he? He came in as a footballing consultant at first and then was made permanent as the director of football. And his body of work for the majority of the 5.5 years has been fantastic. He's been an integral part of this journey we've gone on. Of course, recency bias means people in the short term are only really going to remember him for the last 12 months and some of the decisions that have been made by the club in the last 12 months and perhaps his part that he played in that. However, a hugely instrumental figure in our rise back to the Championship has departed the club, and that's really what we've got to remember Neil for, isn't it?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, Joe. I think he's got a very complex legacy with Argyle, certainly more good than bad, without a doubt. He oversaw the rise from League Two to the Championship. He did other great work off the pitch. It was key in the amalgamation of the women's team of the club, which I know is something that Simon Hallett's hugely big on for a whole club structure, really big on the very evident move that Argyle are pushing for, but haven't officially said yet, that we're very clearly trying to get Category 2 academy status with the Brickfields push. I think he was instrumental in that. He had a fantastic contracts book, which got us the likes of Azaz, Mumba, Whittaker, all these excellent players that he knew from his previous job. And I think by and large, if he'd have left with Schumacher, or left, around the same time as Schumacher, everyone would be saying that he's got a pretty much a flawless record. I think obviously, the last year hasn't been too good. It wouldn't be me talking about Neil Dewsnip if I didn't mention the fact that I spoke to him in Spain and was very honest in my view about some of the concerns I had about the Rooney appointment and about the way the last half season had gone in a constructive way. And he to me and my friend who I was there with, he was very much, said we welcome criticism. He still argued against it, mind you, but he said we welcome criticism and then proceeded to tell me why I was wrong. No, I'm saying that a bit tongue in cheek because obviously naturally he's got to back himself. He's the director of football, so of course he's going to believe his own approach is right. But I think certain things about how the last year went were not great. I think clearly he was too keen to move on nucleus of the team that got us promoted, too stubbornly keen to stick behind Ian Foster, and perhaps too stubbornly keen to stick behind Wayne Rooney. And I think and the recruitment went downhill badly. So I think those four factors probably cost him his job, that we know of. I think it came to a natural end. I do think he had the best interest of the football club at heart. I'm not going to, go back on what I've said. I absolutely do think he did have that. But I think he was a bit too my way or the highway by the end. And that's what it did for him. And it all went sour, didn't it? I think to an extent. And I think it was the right decision for all parties. Like I said, I do think that he's got one more job in him. He's getting on in years now. He's 62, 63, I think. But he's very sprightly. You can tell he puts the hours in, and I think he'll want one more challenge that he can maybe take another club up through the leagues, maybe like a Tranmere or someone like that, like another club that's Mansfield, maybe another club that's got a bit of money close to where he is that he can maybe do a bit of another rebuild at. But yeah, I have to give my full honest view because that is how the last year went, and I don't think there's any point in completely sugarcoating that. But the first 4.5 years of his tenure at Argyle were near enough a resounding success in the sense of the players he brought in, the culture, the data analytical approach that stemmed through the club, the style of football that stemmed through the club, the bringing in of the youth team, the women's team into the club structure. I think all of that he did fantastically well for 4.5 years, and I think the last year was, I think Welson's vision got clouded a little bit. I think wasn't for the want of trying. So, yeah, thank you very much to Neil Dewsnip for 5.5 very, very memorable years, and I do wish him all the very best wherever he goes next. I think we are very clearly going to appoint a new director of football of some sort. I think the age of the model where the manager decides everything at a club, I think that died with Sir Alex Ferguson, really. Maybe Arsene Wenger at an absolute push. I think every club now, even down to League One, League Two, has some kind of technical director structure, don't they? It's extremely rare that a manager just does everything now. So we will be bringing a new director of football of some sort, whether that's now or whether it's in the summer. My suspicion is it'll be more likely in the summer. I think Jimmy Dickinson's doing most of the recruitment, and I think maybe the structural stuff is being done by Andrew Parkinson. And it's important we get this hire right, because we don't want to make the mistake of rushing in. Obviously, with like we did with Foster and with Rooney. I know with a manager, with a head coach, you have to rush in, and you could argue we maybe didn't even rush in enough, given they only had one day on the training ground. But a director of football, that's a little bit different, because that's something that's like a structural long-term role. It's a back office role, if you like. It's something we need to absolutely get right, interview a lot of people, and make sure we hire the right person, because we want to hire somebody who's going to lead the club, run the football inside of the club for the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, I think here, and just finishing off on Neil Dewsnip, I think on behalf of all at Argyle Life and, representing the Green Army tonight, we do thank you for your 5.5 year service. As Sam says, some wonderful memories in there. And most of all, from all of us on this podcast, thank you for humouring Sam and Aaron on their famous trip to Marbella in the summer. It's a conversation they talk very highly of. As Sam keeps mentioning,
he loved it as much as we did. I think I'll say this: he loves a good debate, and I think he enjoyed it as much as we did.
As Sam keeps referencing. So Neil, all the best for the future. I'm sure he's not done in football.
Joe, can I just make a point about Neil? Because nobody should underestimate the role he has had in setting up the academy, because he set up the structure where we're spread widely amongst Devon and Cornwall now. And if you look at how our academy results are year by year, as against Exeter, for example, we're very much now the number one in the Southwest. And that is down to Neil and what he's done. We are heading for a Category 2 academy. I was down at Falston Park, as it's called, last week. Really impressed in what's going to happen there. And some of that, and much of that, is down to Neil's foresight and determination that we should get the academy that we need and deserve if we're going to push for our championship status to be kept. So credit. I met him many times. Very pleasant, dry wit, and had the best interest of the club at heart. But just to say one thing, and I know people say that Foster and Wayne Rooney were his appointments. He may have put their names forward, but the actual decision wasn't made by him. And we should remember that. He wasn't the decision maker, but he obviously put the candidates forward. So I think that's an important point to note. And it was quite interesting. I don't know if anybody picked it up, that Andrew Parkinson, in the press conference, when they said about the appointment of Miron, he very much suggested that the decision was made by Simon. Not saying he didn't agree with it, but he did highlight he wasn't the actual decision maker in the final analysis. And that's how it should be. And that's how it was with both Foster and Wayne Rooney. But no, thanks, Neil. He loved the Dolphin as well, which was always a good sign. He was always happy to have a chat in there. And I did, on a few occasions, enjoy a pint or two with him. And he was a credit to the club, and he served us well. And I wish him good fortune, whatever he does now.
For all
indeed
having words on Neil Dewsnip, I might just jump in for one quick one. I think the analogy I often use, so apologies if you're listening to this for the second, third, or fourth time, is that Neil Dewsnip reminds me an awful lot in terms of legacy as the likes of Matt Butcher or Danny Mayer or Conor Grant, where we can look at them and say they've done fantastic work for the club and we really appreciated having them around. And at the same time, we don't think they're the right person to take us forward. I think all of those players, I think we kind of agree getting to the Championship were some we could upgrade on. And I think Dewsnip's the same. But that doesn't take away, much as it doesn't for those three players that I've mentioned, from the work that he's done over those last 4.5 years, which with the academy, with everything, to be honest, was genuinely superb. I mean, this was the right decision. I think it's a decision that is correct for all parties involved in the decision. But I absolutely, join everybody in wishing him the very best and thanking him for his time here. One that often goes under the radar, but I always go back to is, of course, the caretaker spell at the end of last season, where there was a lot of calls, if you like, for a firefighter. Neil Warnock said he would taken on the job, and Dewsnip trusted himself under a lot of pressure to get the job done, and he did get the job done. And that when he's done that, even in objectively the worst year of his career at Argyle, and I think hats off to him. I'm looking forward to a change. I'm sure in the cold light of day he'll be looking forward to a change wherever he ends up next, because he's not done in the game. And yeah, we all wish him well.
And I want to just reiterate for what I think now that all parties involved have left the club will surely be the final time I mention the Marbella trip on this podcast. There is a chance.
Very unlikely.
But for now, the last time I mentioned it, he did say to me that despite his frustration about certain things, he wasn't a big fan of how Foster was chanted at in the Preston game. Despite his frustration around that, he said that the Argyle fans gave him the two of the best days he's ever had in his career, at home to Leicester and at home to Hull. And he memorably said to me that on the night after Hull game, people were buying him drinks he didn't even know existed. And he asked me, what the hell is a baby Guinness, which is the exact words. To which I offered to buy him another one, and he could find out. To which he politely declined. That's my final word on it for now. And I just hope that he takes those memories of the Leicester and the whole game into whatever he does next of his life.
Neil Dewsnip, you declined a baby Guinness. What's wrong? What's going on?
Given the prices in that place in Marbella, I'm quite glad he declined it, because it was not cheap in there at all.
Yeah, Sam, I'll take you up on the offer. It's still available. Happy to have it on his behalf.
We need another Argyle. We need another Argyle life get together, I think, out on the Barbican. But yeah, no. As Sam mentioned, final point on Neil Dewsnip. He gave us that fantastic day at the end of last season against Hull City, and it will forever be in my mind when people say Plymouth Argyle 1, Hull City 0. It will just be that picture as the full-time whistle is being blown. Kevin Nanscoville putting his hands on his head, and Neil Dewsnip just looking at him with a clear emotion in his face that he knew how big a moment that was for our football club. And it was clear he wore his heart on his sleeve that day, and it was clear how much Plymouth Argyle meant to him on that occasion and through his whole 5.5-year career. So as we finish off with Neil Dewsnip, we wish you all the best, Neil. It's not very often that we have an Olympic gold medalist involved in the football club from his time with Canada, of course, out in Tokyo. But we wish you all the best in whatever you decide to do next. And like Sam and Adam and Graham, I'm sure he is not done in professional football just yet. However, one thing that isn't done, and was 16 days, well, it's longer than 16 days, Adam, isn't it? Until the transfer window slams shut. It's early February this year. I think it's actually
3rd of February, Monday, 11 o'clock.
3rd of February.
3rd of Feb.
Yeah, so you can join us on the 3rd of February. Probably not up until 9 o'clock, just in case although we might have to if we hear word of something happening late. But we will be here with all the usual faces on deadline day as per normal. But let's be brutally honest with you, let's hope it's a lot busier than it's going to look at it is at the moment, because we talk about the lack of substitutions yesterday. It's really highlighting the lack of depth and how much we really need bodies in. I made the point, I'm quite happy to air this publicly. I made the point in our WhatsApp group chat a little bit earlier. I would find it incredibly disappointing if we came out of this transfer window making a profit. I say that on the proviso that Whittaker, Mumba, even Tegan Finn, who's being rumoured today to be wanted by the people, providing they're not sold for astronomical money where it would be actually really difficult to make a loss, I would be quite disappointed if we actually come out of this transfer window ahead of the game, because we desperately need bodies. If we are serious about staying in the Championship this year, I make a plea to Andrew, to Simon, to the whole board at Argyle, please do what you can to support Miron, because, lads, the options were there to see yesterday. We don't have any options, do we? Like, it's I like what we're trying to do, but we're desperately in need of what? At least one, probably two centre halves. We probably need a centre half in before the weekend, because Galloway fell apart in the last 5 minutes yesterday. We've already got Such out for at least 3 weeks. So we're going to need a centre half in ASAP. We need a goal scorer. As much as I'm praising Ryan Hardy, we do need a goal scorer up front, and we're probably going to need people for depth in other positions. I mean, Adam, your transfer centre is going to be very busy, isn't it?
I hope so. I hope so, if I'm allowed back, of course. I look at it with every transfer window, with obviously the players that have left. Every single one of those is kind of, well, there's one more now needed in. And when you consider what we already needed going into this month, and now we've lost the services of Gibson, Gray, etc., Adam Forshaw, obviously. That then becomes an issue of, well, we're probably going to need to make at least 5 more signings, which is worrying. As much as it is an extended window, it's a little bit worrying that we're leaving ourselves with so much to do, with so little time left, which isn't going to ease
very
my
quickly,
nerves.
Adam. Just on for the audio listeners, the Clan Dad on YouTube says 2 centre backs, 2 central midfielders, and at least 1 striker. I mean, you say we're probably going to need 5 players. Is that your shopping list essentially? Would that be what your desire?
Generally speaking, yes. And I think a lot of what's on my wish list or shopping list or whatever you want to call it is in the spine of the side. That is where we're lacking for me. There needs to be at least 1 centre forward. There needs to be at least 1 central midfielder. There needs to be at least 1 centre back. And in a lot of those, you can probably argue you need a couple as well. I think with the likes of Puhac coming in, with Sorinola not getting game time yesterday, Mumba, UNBEATEN, if we're going 3 at the back, with Sissoko as well, the roles he can play, I think out wide in those sorts of spaces, we're pretty well covered for whatever Miron Muslic wants us to do. In the middle, we are painfully weak. And how do you fix that? Well, I mean, I think you buy you buy players in all 3 of those positions, and at least 1. I mean, we've been linked with them across the window. It's gone a bit quiet in recent days, but these things can kick off very quickly, as we know in the transfer window. I'm always taken back to the first window after coming up to the Championship, where there were so many rumours going around. It took us a while to make our first sign, and then it turned out to be Julio Pleguezuelo, who no one had ever heard of. So these things can happen very, very, very quickly, and they need to. Ultimately, I agree. I think, Graham, I think you made the point of what Brannigan and Volks did to our midfield yesterday. Our midfield wasn't good enough yesterday, and it needs another body in there. In defence, and this is coming from Victor Palson's biggest fan, we need a new central defender to, if anything, just to bulk up the numbers. And of course, going up front, look, Beidou can play as a striker in certain circumstances. He played about 50% of his games up front for Elfsborg last season, but he's not a striker in this system. That's not going to work for whichever direct system Muslic wants to do. I'd much rather see us bring somebody else in, or maybe get Hardy and then Tijani back from their knocks finally to provide that competition. And then it's a you end up in the final week of the window and the final hours of the window, if you like, where it's a little bit of a lottery, as we saw last time around with the Al-Hajj and Beidou circus. So I hope they're very busy. I hope they're keeping the options open. I do hope, to be fair, that they haven't closed themselves off to the loan market. I'll make the same point again with the 5 loan slots, as I often do, that we can easily top that with a few more loans and just leave some out of the squad where necessary. That is going to remain an option to us. The other option, of course, to open up those loan slots is potentially to make a few of the ones you've already got permanent. I mean, can we strike a deal for Darko JB? I know opinion would be split on it, but it would open up that slot for a team for a place in the squad. So there's a lot of things we can do. There's a lot of things we can do.
Obafemi and Tijani possibly reaching agreement to send them back to their parent clubs if they're not going to get.
Absolutely, yeah. So there's a lot of options open. Is the way I'd put it. And I right now, I don't think we're going to hear anything before we get to QPR, but I didn't think we were going to hear something before the other QPR game right back early in the season. On Thursday night, we signed Michael Obafemi and he played. So we wait and see, and hopefully there's more news soon.
I
Sam,
agree with the comment.
Sam, very quickly, I'll come to you. Just jump in on this one. Tyler's just sent us in a question. The reverse question is, who would you guys look to move on even if it's clearing off the wage bill? At the moment, we can't afford to be moving people on because we're so short.
Yeah. I suppose better might be the only one, just because that's the one position where we actually have got a few. Because we've got Mumba over there, we've got now Puach there. Galloway can
Not to mention Saxon Early's back as well, so the numbers are building up.
So I guess maybe one of the left wing backs, be it better Early or maybe even both those two, I guess would be the only position. But apart from that, it's kind of weird. We've got probably more left wing backs than we have any other position. Probably a lot of other positions put together, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, maybe better, maybe Saxon Early just to get them off the wage bill. I think there are other players who I wouldn't be adverse to see go at some point, like Polston. Houghton, I think, is probably coming to the end of his time with Argyle. And I must admit, I've not been at all impressed by Obafemi. I have to be truthful with you, and I don't think he's going to fit Muslic's style of playing, which demands very hard work and a very high press, which I have to say, with all due respect, phrases I entirely associate with Michael Obafemi. I did see a Burnley fan saying that, maybe we might give them a bit of money off the Whittaker deal if they let us have Obafemi. I think I'd probably give them a bit of money off the Whittaker deal if they took Obafemi back, to be honest. It's probably the way I'd see it on that one. So, good news coming in live. Blackburn are one up against Pompey. That's good for our
I've always liked John Eustace. He's always been one of my favourite managers.
Oh, absolutely. We do like John Eustace. But yeah, so I think there are a few players I wouldn't be shedding any tears to see go. Certainly Adam Forshaw came into that category as well. But as it is now, certainly if Galloway's in you, we cannot afford to lose any more players apart from maybe Ogbeta/Early. And I mean, crikey, if we don't get another centre-back through the door by 12 o'clock Friday in order to play Saturday, and Galloway's not fit, what are we going to do? Because I don't think Puach can play in the back three.
Well, he did at Brentford for the last 10 minutes, didn't he?
Wasn't that we went to four at the back? I thought we went to four at the back. And he was left back. Yeah.
I don't want to see it on the regular, whatever the case, to be fair.
No.
I certainly wouldn't want him starting there. I could be wrong there. My recollection of it was he went to four at the back and he was a left back. But either way, I don't think he's going to start there. So then we kind of by default, we have to go to a back four because we only have two fit centre backs. So we don't have to go to a back four, which, as much as I quite like a back four, clearly isn't how Nance wants us to play in the interim. Clearly isn't how Muslic probably wants to play based on how he played at Cercle de Bruges. So again, we're already having to bend over backwards and tweak things about just because of the lack of transfer activity, quite bluntly.
But to Sam, to just put it in the context, it's not actually, in terms of transfer activity, Argyle are one of the most active in the Championship because it's actually very few transfers to Championship teams in the window so far. I don't know what the reason for that is, but there's certainly
A couple got some done early. A couple got some done really early doors, didn't they? First, second day of the window. But
yeah.
Overall in the Championship, it has seemed to be very quiet the last week or so.
Very quiet, and I don't know whether that's financial fair play reasons or what for the teams at the top. But I think we've got to get a minimum of three, and that's got to be centre back, midfield, and forward, and they've got to be pace, physicality, and energy. Those are the three essential requisites, and height, because we're short on all of those qualities, and that's what they've got to be. I do wonder actually whether we might be dipping into Europe a bit more, because obviously with Puach coming out of nowhere, effectively, as far as we're concerned, there may be some other players like that who have got ability. Might take a little time to adjust, but that might be a better shopping window for us than, because how many Championship sides are going to give us players. So otherwise, we're going to dip into League One, possibly League Two for players unproven at Championship level. So, it's a real tough recruitment in 2 and a bit weeks. And I mean, hopefully the Miron speech would have inspired players to come who might not have come because they like what they've seen. But January is always really difficult. We have got the ability to pay over and above because, as Joe, as you said at the outset, we've got some money to spend. I think we're fairly neutral in what we've done already this year. So we were promised spending. So let's see what transpires. But as for Tijani, you wouldn't have heard Joe Edwards at Senior Greens because he was asked about Tijani and he spoke really highly of him and actually said he's got the hardest shot of anybody he's seen in football. So not that necessarily means something, but he spoke very positively about him and desperately disappointed that he got injured when he did. And yes, he's had a few iffy games. But if you look back to the Cheltenham pre-season game where he scored 2 goals, if you look at the nature of the goals he scored, everyone thought, blimey, we got some player here. So it's just the Sheffield Wednesday game was a disaster and he got injured fairly soon after that. So, but there may be a player in that. I wouldn't send him back. I would. He's 6'4". He's physical. We might not be able to get a 6'4" physical player in the window. So I would keep him.
I get that.
Thought?
Yeah. Sorry, just very quickly. He is absolutely the profile of Muslic's striker, right? In a way, it's a bit more direct, a bit more bustling, a bit more up and at him. I just hope he doesn't. I think he is now back in full training. I just hope he doesn't take too long to get up to match sharpness because, if he is, as we hope he might be, that maybe he's the one. But there's a lot of ifs and buts there. A lot of ifs and buts.
I think if you'd said to us, probably middle of September, possibly start of October, that our season would take a twist where Victor Paulsen was the linchpin of our backline and Mohamed Tijani was going to be the saviour of all our problems, you'd have done quite well to find somebody who'd take you up and think you were serious on that.
I'm not saying he's the saviour, but I wouldn't send him back because even as a sort of off the bench option, his physicality, presence, and seeming ability.
What we know of Miron. What we know of Miron's style of football is exactly what Mohamed Tijani's profile is, essentially, isn't it? So he may well turn out to be the one. Nearly 2,000 people joining us. We've reached 67 minutes. We're going to rattle through a couple of questions now, and then we will get on to a QPR preview ahead of Saturday lunchtime's game. So let's rattle through these quickly. JCD on X says, what's this about Tegan, Finn and Premier League clubs? Well, Adam has done a transfer centre update. Head over to argylelife.com for that. It would seem that the vultures are swooping for young Tegan, who did score direct from a free kick today in the Academy's under-17s defeat at Forest Green. Me and Graham had the pleasure of seeing Tegan play in the FA Youth Cup the other week, and it's clear to see that everybody knows what Tegan's got about him, and he is one of our more exciting prospects. So hopefully Argyle can sort something out where Tegan is at the club moving forward.
I mean, he's not 17 yet, so he can't sign a pro contract.
No.
So, just to say, Neil Dewsnip in conversation did say Newcastle have been monitoring him for some time, and at the last game, who do we play in the FA Youth Cup? Lincoln. There was an English coach there specifically looking at him for the England under-17s. So he's on several people's radar for sure, and not surprising because for me, he's the best player to have come out of the academy in recent years by far.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a new one for me. So I'm going to take time just to stop the questions and say it. Ray S has gifted us £2 with what I think is called in YouTube circles a super chat. Ray, thank you very much. You're very kind. Maybe that will go towards Sam buying one of us a baby Guinness at some point in the near future. But he recommends Sam Dolby, who's top scorer up in Scotland at the moment, as a potential to our striker issues. So Ray, thank you very much for the support. Very, very grateful for that. So that's Tegan Finn dealt with. P321 Man 1 on YouTube, a regular submitter of questions, says, is Hazard out with a groin injury? Well, we think it's a groin injury, but listening to Miron Muslic last night in the press conference, it sort of sounds like he will be back for Saturday. He said that he kind of hinted that the decision to leave him out last night leaves him in a good place for Saturday and Wednesday. So whether or not that's been lost in translation a little bit, and maybe he wasn't meant to have said that, I don't know. But that was the gist we were getting from the press conference last night, Sam.
Yeah, interestingly, there was no mention of like if selected at all. It was very much like if he's ready, he'll be back in. So I think we know, without a shadow of a doubt, who Miron's #1 goalkeeper is, based on that. But yeah, I think what the word he said was that if he had a slight knock, and if he played Conor Hazard last night, he might have risked aggravating it and leaving him out for a longer period of time. But by resting him last night, it gave a good chance he would be back for the QPR game on Saturday, or perhaps at the latest the Burnley game on Wednesday, rather than the longer period of absence than that. So I imagine he'll be back in soon.
Yeah, and I guess if it is a groin muscular injury like that, the better off is you just take a bit of time just to let whatever slight knock has happened heal. Mike Hoare on YouTube says Galloway also injured, will be missing on Saturday. Well,
down, Pompey 2 down.
Pompey 2 down. Cheers, Jeff. Galloway also injured. Will he be missing on Saturday? It didn't look good. I mean, quite frankly, I couldn't believe that he even stayed on the pitch. I thought it might have cost us at one point last night when they were trying to get through. If it wasn't for Ogbeta covering on that left side, then the lad was through. It really was crazy that Galloway stayed on the pitch, but hey ho, he did what he could. I admired him for going up in the 94th minute for the corner right at the end of the game. I'm not sure what he was capable of doing up there, but I'll take my hat off to him for that. Adam, probably one for you. Mike Hughes says, any news on Lowe from Wickham? I know you did a piece on this. I don't think Swansea have had a couple of bids rejected, haven't they?
Yeah, most of the news on this one has come from the Swansea end rather than ours. And to my knowledge, and what's in the public domain, no bid accepted from anybody yet. So I guess everything's on the table. But if you were to put a gun to my head, I'd say it's more likely to be in South Wales than South Devon at the end of the window. But we'll see.
It'd be at Luton.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, because
we'll go to South Wales for an away game. That'll be it.
Because he's a
Bloomfield,
Cardiff fan
just
as well,
gone there.
so I don't think he'll want to be playing for Swansea.
Andrew Heathman on YouTube says Sam Gallagher could be an option, not getting many starts currently. He did play against us a couple of weeks ago, and Mark Robbins spoke incredibly highly of Sam Gallagher after the game. And I would suggest that his starts may well be about to increase now that Tom Cannon has been recalled for a bidding war between Sheffield United and Sunderland. It sounds like Leicester City have smacked a price tag, and it's whoever can get close to it. Tyler asks, do you think our system identifying backups for the backups has been thrown up in the air by seeming recognition that the possession-based play won't work for us? I mean, this is a very interesting point. We've only got a couple of minutes, really, if anybody wants to take a talk on this. But I suppose now that Miron's come in, he'll have a different idea of where he wants the recruitment team to look, doesn't he? And with only a couple of weeks to go, it makes it a bit more complex.
Ultimately, I was just going to say that is ultimately the one problem of changing something so close to the window. I think we've been over it to the death that it ultimately had to be done, and that decision to move on from Wayne Rooney had to be made. But of course, this is the downside, that you're bringing in somebody with a completely different philosophy. Now, I will say, the board weren't forced to bring somebody in with a completely different philosophy. They could have gone for a little bit of continuity, but that's the situation in which we find ourselves. So, yeah, much like I said before, I do hope it's true that there are some very, very busy people at Home Park right now.
Yeah, I'm sure they will be, and hopefully they'll keep us busy on deadline day as well. If the last couple of deadline days have gone, we just want one signing to break, Argyle. We want one signing to break while we're live. That's all we want. Harold Mersland asks, Sook's out for how long? That looks to be a 2 to 3 weeker. That's what Miron Muslic suggested last night. So it sounds like potentially Ryan Hardy, Mohamed Tajani, Cornell Such and Joe Edwards may actually all become available all at one time, which will feel like Christmas to the new head coach, because that's a pretty much a rough timescale for all four of them, I think, from what we've gathered from the press recently. And last but not least, just one question from Becky MC412 on YouTube. What did we think of the 3-4-2-1 last night? Because it was definitely more that than a 3-4-3, particularly first half. The issue for me with the system is it was probably better off being a 3-4-3, because essentially we had three number 10s on the field in Rami El Hajj, Morgan Whittaker and Michael Baidoo. We didn't. That system needs an out-and-out centre forward, doesn't it, Sam?
Sorry, it would help if it wasn't on mute. I did a you, Joe. Yeah, it does. I mean, to be fair, I think it's always a 3-4-2-1 to an extent. It's very rare you'd see like three out-and-out strikers. Obviously, there's a little bit of debate about whether you have more width or whether you have them a bit more narrow behind the striker. And I can see what Becky's coming from, because I do think it was a bit more narrow behind the striker as opposed to width. But it's all a matter of varying extent, because in a 3-4-3, it's always going to be your wing backs providing the width. I think the two on the inside are always going to come in to some greater or lesser extent. But I think what it really boils down to is what Joe said, is that it was three players who were all, two and the three don't go, and it was three players who were all clearly more suited either side of the striker. But then who else were we going to play? Because Tijani's not fit yet. Andre Gray's off in Turkey. Obafemi's not been playing well at all. So, and Baidoo had a half-decent game at Brentford, grew into it as it went on. So it was Baidoo or Bundu, and I think we just went for Baidoo just on the belief that maybe he's got a little bit more magic, could maybe pull something out of nothing. I would have certainly brought Bundu on much earlier, as I said earlier on, but yeah, there was no natural striker in there. Hopefully Ryan Hardy's fit soon, because I do think for all his lack of end product in front of goal this season, he does still stretch defenders in a way that no one else quite does. Maybe a new centre forward coming in who's more suited to the Muslic style. Maybe that centre forward, as Graham alludes to, will be Tijani. But yeah, I think for this to really thrive, we need a more natural striker playing as a striker. But the good news is, as I round off this question, that's now Blackburn 3, Pompey 0. So that game is now done and dusted, and hopefully Blackburn can give their goal difference a bit of a pummeling, although it is still 15 better than ours. So more before the end would be nice.
Nice bit of context. And of course, as we all know, a goal-scoring striker is so easy to come by in the month of January. That's it. That rounds off the first section of the show. We've just got a little 15 minutes or so preview to come now of the QPR game as we reach 1 hour 18 on tonight's episode. 2,000 people joining us live. You are very welcome. So let's discuss the visit of the R's, an early start once again. We're getting used to these 12:30s now. We've already had a couple this season, and there's a couple more still to come before Sky Sports, I think, have to announce the final round of television games very soon. I think it's certainly before the end of this month, because it's March the 8th is the next round of games that need to be covered.
Basis, so.
It's a 4-week rolling program. So
have we gone back to that? Does it not have to be done?
No,
not after the end of February.
No.
Up to the end of February, it's got to be X amount in advance, and then it's a 4-week rolling.
Right. Okay. Sorry, my mistake. I thought they were carrying it through the whole season, but obviously not. So a couple more weeks to go yet until we find out how many more 12:30s we get. Sky do love a good game at Home Park, and they're bringing their Sky Sports Plus cameras to Home Park this time for the visit at QPR. 12:30 kickoff. Adam, I'm sure you're going to provide us with a lovely preview piece on Marti Cifuentes' R's, who, fair play to them, have picked up a fair bit of late. They've climbed themselves out of danger for the time being, something we'd like to do at some point. What can we expect from the Hoops?
Yeah. fair play to them, like you say, for pulling themselves up from where they were. I think Graham mentioned, was it 6th in the form table recently? So shows it's another tough game coming our way. That being said, no surprises necessary for those who watched the reverse fixture. Of course, that was in very specific circumstances, was playing an hour with 10. But I'm still expecting the fairly classic 4-2-3-1, the fairly, the sort of football we expect
Sorry,
from a.
I've just had a Gavin Ward flashback. Sorry.
Oh gosh, I'm saying, yeah. I mean, I'm sorry.
He was the fourth
putting you through
official
that.
last night.
I know. I was breaking
Oh.
out a cold sweat when he was walking out of the tunnel before the game, and it wasn't for a good reason either. It sent shivers down my spine.
Yeah. Rarely happens to me for good reason either. But yeah. So I've it's. You know what you're going to get with QPR. They're the classic. I don't want to sound stereotypical, but the classic European management of being comfortable on the ball, whilst also, as we saw when we were there, getting it forward quickly with Fry as a fairly tall centre forward, and they've got Chelar as well. I'm not sure if he's fit at the moment. You do a very, very similar job. The midfield may look a little bit different to what we had last time. Jonathan Varane was a new signing when we first went up there, and I think they'd have liked to have brought him on in that game in the sort of form that he's in now, because he's very much more settled now, and I think would have been able to make that sort of difference had he had that game time in England behind him. When we were down to 10, and Sam Field is still there in midfield with as he was last time around. So that the one thing that we are perhaps less likely to see are the two wingers, who there was a lot of fanfare about when we first went up there with Karamoku Dembele and Saito, I believe, on the other side, who'd recently been brought in. I think one's more of a bench player these days and one's not fit. So it's yeah, we're likely to see Ilias Chair, Paul Smith in those positions based on the way things have recently been, who are both still very talented players. I mean, you can say what you like about why Ilias Chair was absent last time, but it doesn't look like he's going to be this time. So as an interesting one. So yeah, I think you can get at them. I've been impressed with Nardi in goal, but in defence, we're not seeing. I mean, Steve Cook's going to be a huge miss for them. There's a Clark Salter, I think, who kind of came back at a similar time, but isn't really in shape to have the same effect. So I think you can trouble them at the heart of the defence, particularly if we have a couple of creators in there, which I've no doubt we will, no matter who lines up, whether it be Beidou, Al-Haj or Whittaker in those situations. That gives me confidence. I'm just not confident we'll keep them out the other way. I would imagine, I say this quite a lot with Plymouth Argyle at home. It's not a guarantee this time around, but I suggest that both teams to score is a little bit more likely than not. I'm expecting, entertainment in inverted commas, depending on the sort of playing styles we see. But I think both teams will favour going forward to defending. At least that's where their strengths lie. So, yeah. I won't give you the prediction yet, but I'd suggest goals either way.
Yeah, I think, Graham, this is going to be very different to last night's game, wasn't it? Gary Rowett had 2 banks of 4. There was never more than 8 yards separating the midfield 4 than the defensive 4. It was very hard to break them down. Martí Cifuentes plays a bit more of an expansive brand of football. They're I've seen QPR a couple of times in recent months on said Sky Sports platforms, and I've actually been quite impressed with how they've gone about it. Even when they weren't in great form, they still have a very pleasing style of football, really. So that could actually play into our strengths a little bit, won't it? Because we really did struggle last night in trying to get through Oxford's banks of 4, and perhaps if it is a bit more of an open game, then maybe Miron's aggressive press will yield a bit more of a fruitful outcome in front of goal.
Yeah, I mean they're a possession-based side and got some talent. Certainly, is it? I never know how to pronounce his name. I'll just call him Chair. He's certainly one of the most.
So that's
he's one of the most talented players in the league. They play quite open, so I mean we've got every opportunity of getting at them, and equally they've got every opportunity of getting at us. Frey is a big monster centre forward. I think he was the one who scored from the corner, wasn't he? Near post corner. So we've got to be on a metal there, because I think they've done that a few times this season. So him and Poulsen will make an interesting battle. because he's not the quickest, which is reassuring. I think in this game, we've got to score first. We score first, and this is what happened a bit last. If we'd scored in the first 20 minutes, the crowd would have been lifted, the whole dynamic would have changed. We've got to score first. And if we do, then we can get up, then the crowd can get behind, and we can win it. But
we've just got to turn these periods of dominance
absolutely.
with a goal, don't we? Because even Rooney's Argyle at home, Graham, for all their failings, there were a lot of games where they had moments where they were on top and weren't able to score, unlike Steven Schumacher's Argyle used to be able to do. So if Muslic can get into them, that when you're on top, you have to score.
I mean, Morgan's the typical example of that. Last season, virtually every shot he hit from distance went in. I mean, he had an incredible strike rate. And this season, up until recently, every shot he's hit has been blocked because they've doubled up and blocked him. I mean, the goal against Brentford would have given him more confidence. He could be our match winner because he didn't have his best game yesterday, but he's the sort of player that can step up and make a difference. And if we're going to win one of the three of the 8 days, I always felt QPR was the one that we were going to win because we can get at them, and they're not so defensive and robust. I mean, Burnley, was it nine goals in 26 games, is it? I think they've conceded. So that's not going to be an easy one. So this is the game to win, and we've just got to get at them. And they are. I mean, when we played away, we did withstand their attacks pretty well with 10 men. We went above and beyond. So we're capable of holding them at bay, but we just got to get at them, and hopefully we will and get that first goal. That's what I keep saying.
Sam, really tricky question to ask you, really. Of course, there's been mentioned on screen there by Kevin Jones that the point yesterday is looking better now with Pompey losing, because of course the big issue with not winning yesterday was that all Pompey have extra games in hand. Well, one of them is about to be wasted essentially with Luke getting beat. But away from that, real tough question for you, I guess, is who on earth's going to start this, and what sort of shape are we going to have? That's your question before we do predictions.
Assuming we're going on our current knowledge of who is available, if we sign another centre-back, then I just think you do a straight swap with them in for Galloway, because I don't think Galloway's going to be fit. I think it has to be 4 at the back. Now, I want to just briefly say I have been corrected that apparently Timo did finish the game at left centre-back at Brentford. But I think what it was we were initially at a back 4 when we made the subs. And then when we scored, we went to kind of a back 5 to sit in. So I think I was partially right, but Graham was also primarily correct in that Timo did end the game, Timo Puac as a left centre-back. So I'll stand corrected on that. However, I still maintain I don't want to see him there for 90 because I think he'll just, backs to the wall, seeing out a 1-0 win, fair enough. But I think he'll just kind of wander out of position too much and leave too much space. So I could be wrong. I don't think he'll start there. Based on what we've got, I think it has to be a back 4 just by default, which is probably going to be Pleguezuelo and Paulson centre backs. That just doesn't sound right as I'm saying it. We've got to bring someone in, haven't we? We've got to bring someone in, or else it's going to be something not very pretty, or just pray that Galloway somehow fit. I can't.
I'll be brutal. I can't see that.
No.
Not with how he was at full time yesterday. I can't see that at all.
Okay, so it's either one of 3 options. Then it's Galloway has a Lazarus style recovery. It's we bring someone in. It's we play Puac at left centre back, or it's we go to a back 4. It's one of those 4 options, and hopefully one of the first 2. But we'll see. What I would do, irrespective of the shape we play, is bring Sorinola in on the right side, because I don't think it's a coincidence that we were weaker for only having width on one side. I would probably rest Mumba for a game or 2. I think Mumba's a good player in the right system. I think he's been one of our better players in a pretty bad season, but even so, I think I would go width on both sides. I would go Sorinola and Puac on either side, and I would probably drop Darko JB, who I think with all respect to him, and look, there's a lot of disagreement in this podcast on him. Some people think he's amazing, some people think he's terrible, some people are right in the middle.
I don't think he's amazing. I think there's a player there who I should quantify. I don't think we will see the best of him. I think somebody else will probably see the best of him, but we're just part of his development.
That was more aimed at John, to be fair. But I think there's a wide spectrum of opinion on JB. I'm more on the negative end, the positive, but I do appreciate he can have a good game at times. He had an absolute shocker last night, an absolute shocker. So I would probably put JB out the team again, assuming no CM signs. I would be tempted by Houghton. I genuinely would be tempted by Caleb Robertson again, because I think he did have a really bright game at Brentford. So I'd maybe go Randall and Roberts, Sorinola and Puach, Whittaker, Bundu, Beidou, and probably give Al Hadj a rest. So Whittaker, Bundu, Beidou, or maybe give Beidou a rest, one of the two. Pleguezuelo, Powson, and pray we have somebody to play at left centre back who's viable, whether that's a new signing, whether it's Galloway. It's slim pickings, isn't it? But that's where I'd go.
Graham, you're shaking your head. Surely the logical thing is just Puach plays at left centre back, Sorinola plays at right back, and Mumba at left back.
Mumba at left back, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I would give thought to bringing Caleb in for JB. I think people forget JB's only 19. He's very young and early in his development. So, and I will commend him. He knew he wasn't having a good game, but you look at what he was doing in the 90 plus minutes. He was driving forward, trying to do his best, not knowing he wasn't at his best. So I commend him for that. But I would play Caleb because Caleb is very good at moving the ball. He's quite combative in the middle. I would favour him in place of JB. Otherwise, it would be the same side that we've got, the same back five that we've just talked about. Adam and Caleb in the middle, and the same front three that started last night.
Yeah, I think Caleb, as I said on the FA Cup podcast last week, it sounded to me on the radio certainly, and from what I've heard of people at the game, that it was almost like a coming of age performance from Caleb Roberts.
Yeah,
definitely. He was definitely more of a. I don't mean this in a negative sense. It's going to sound like it was more like he became a man in that game than he did in the performances last season, and that is a real positive to Caleb. And it's difficult. It's difficult for him, obviously, not being able to play 18s football this year. It's a really difficult season for him, and to come in and do what he did last weekend, I think is hugely admirable. And hopefully, if there is going to be a change in midfield, then hopefully it is him who gets the nod. Let's go around the group. I was actually, whilst Adam and Sam were talking, I was just taking a look at the predictions challenge. It's been a good week so far for me and John. Full house of points so far this week with 1-1 draws last night. So let's go around the group, see if you can remember what you've predicted in the challenge, or if it's going to change coming into tomorrow night's game. Graham, start with you. What's your score prediction?
I think this is the game of the three we're going to win 2-1.
Yeah, that's exactly what you've said in the predictions challenge. Adam?
It was, yeah.
I do think it's goals at each end. I'm going to, based on the absentees, I'm going to take the slightly negative view of it. It'll be 2-1 the other way, but I hope I'm wrong.
Boo. Sam
very quickly, but very, very quickly, Graham has just about won me over to the Puach left centre-back idea, but if and only if we get no one else in, and if and only if Galloway doesn't pass the fitness test, fine, I'll go with it. But I'm still sticking with Bundu in the front three, because I think he adds a bit more directness. We are becoming the draw specialist of the league, certainly at home park. So I think we're going to add another one, 2-2.
2-2. Interesting. I too have gone with a 2-1 home win on Saturday afternoon. I did see there's a really weird TikTok account that's going around that does this robot ball challenge that predicts the scores, and it had it 1-1 until the 93rd minute when QPR would go 2-1 up, and then immediately a ball went into the back of the net with Argyle's badge on it to make it 2-2. So I'm not sure I quite want a 93rd minute goal for QPR and then a 94th minute equaliser, but as we know from home park, half the ground would have left by then anyway. So
there's also a very weird TikTok that does edits of me from Pie Faces vlogs with me talking about random football games and putting editing and clipping up certain bits of it with music to the back of it, which if these people who are watching Argyle live, I am scared and impressed.
You are a TikTok sensation, Sam Down. That is for sure. And there'll be more Pie Corner, Sam's Corner on Pie Face's YouTube channel coming up in future away games, I'm sure, probably at Sunderland next weekend. That is pretty much all there is to talk about tonight. To be honest, we've been going for 95 minutes, which is probably just about what Darren Bond will play on Saturday afternoon at home park, I would imagine. No relation to James, I understand. But that's it. Do join us again on Sunday night. We will be back with another Motley Crew to discuss the QPR victory. In the meantime, if you have joined halfway through tonight's episode and you do need to catch up, you can catch it on YouTube, X, all the various platforms. It will be audioed up. So you'll be able to listen to it on Spotify and all the usual platforms. The QPR preview, that will be separate. So if you just wanted to watch that, if you didn't want to hear us ramble about everything else, that will be separate and up towards the weekend. But all that's left for me to say is thank you, Graham. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Sam. Have a very good rest of the week, folks. We will see you all again on Saturday or Sunday evening. We'll see most of you at the ground at Saturday lunchtime. Until then, keep it green. And hey, look, good things come to those who wait. Second win in as many games is on its way around the corner, surely. Night all.